Welcome to the Prof Talk Pod, brought to you by the Engaged Professor. Every 2 weeks, join us as we talk about tips and tricks to help you connect with your students, engage with industry, and stay up to date on all the teaching trends. We'll give you actionable strategies that will help improve your teaching today. Thank you for being here. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Prof Talk Pod. My name is Becky Achen, and I'm coming to you today with a solo show. And I'm a little bit excited about this one because I know the past episodes, we've talked a little bit about things you can do this summer, ways to potentially manage burnout, and ways that you need to be thinking about using your time wisely. Whether that's getting some rest and recovery, and being that it's July, I can totally understand maybe walking away and taking some much needed mental break from your work as a teacher. For others, that might mean getting ahead of what's to come in the fall. And I've recommended in the past that taking a balanced approach to using some of the summertime to make some progress forward in things that you want to improve, while also using some of it to rest and relax. And so, in this episode, for those who have decided they're kind of ready to maybe dive in and to do something impactful for their students moving forward, I wanted to talk today about revising an assignment. And I've talked about this before in the podcast, kind of briefly. I've talked about it in the newsletter that I often will use AI to improve my assignments, to take an assignment that wasn't working and try to make it better. And I thought it might be useful to actually walk through what that process looks like for me. And so, as we go through this episode, I'm just going to outline kind of the steps that I take and how I integrate AI into my process and how it helps me ideate and really kind of hone in on what I really want to do and make my assignments better. And then I'll give you an example of an assignment that I've done that with actually just a little bit earlier this summer. So, for me, the first thing that I do when I recognize that an assignment isn't working, I think about what it is that doesn't work. And there are a couple of sources of information that you can determine that from. It could be the outputs that the students are turning in aren't giving you what you were hoping for, what you expected when you wrote the assignment instructions. That could be in quality, it could just be in general output. Maybe the instructions you gave them aren't as clear as they could be, or maybe students don't have the skill set you thought they might coming into your classroom. Now, I know I make a lot of assumptions, especially with my incoming freshmen, about their technology skills and their ability to create video and graphic content that looks good. And that's a little bit of a bias, right? Because we often assume that young people have had access to these tools. They're all on social media, they're all creating content. So they just know how to use these things. And that assumption often gets me in trouble when I see the output. So it might be the output that you get isn't exactly what you thought. It could be student comments, either directly to you if you've got pretty good rapport with your students, or on evaluations at the end of the semester that tell you that the assignment either isn't working or is providing challenges for your students, but not the ones that you think are helping them learn. And sometimes it's just your own reflection on something that maybe you've been doing for a while, and what you've been getting turned in has steadily not been what you had hoped for, or maybe with the integration and opportunities that AI provide our students, the assignment in its original form just aren't working. So I sit down and diagnose that assignment and literally write out, what is it about this assignment that isn't working? What isn't working both from my perspective and the student perspective? Where do they consistently struggle? And then I'll write down the details of the assignment. What is the level this is for, undergrad or graduate? Are these intro students? Are these capstone students? What are the things that are within the context? Is this an online or an in person course? Or maybe it exists as both. What prior knowledge do I know that they have, or that I hope that they have? And I think about how much ambiguity or, you know, guessing I want students to be required to do. How much creativity do I want them to have with this specific assignment? And I list out those things that aren't working and create a list of usually there's about 5 to 10 things that I don't think are working well with the assignment. And then I do a little bit of my own ideating. What are some things that I've tried in other classes that seem to work? Could those be applied here? What are some things I've heard from colleagues out there that maybe I should try? Is it a different format? Is it a different guidance through the assignment? What is the thing that I might want to try? And so I'll come up with a list of really three things: the context of the class, the assignment and what is and is not working, and my original ideas for updating the assignment. And that first piece is really important because that's your opportunity to provide your own insight, your own perspective, and your own knowledge into the revision of an assignment. And then use that knowledge base within the context of an AI tool like ChatGPT or Claude to almost expand on and push your thinking a little bit further. And so I'll write all that out and I'll have it all ready to go. And then I will actually ask within, I'll write a prompt, right, to ask for ideas for a potential revision to the assignment. And all of that first context gets written into that prompt as part of the suggestion. Now, I'm a big believer in remembering to give your chatbot a role. So tell it how you want it to act. So I ask it to act like an experienced higher education professor in my area of expertise. If I am working on a class that has, some major assignment clearly aligned to specific learning outcomes, I will give it the learning outcomes that the assignment is expected to meet. And then I copy and paste that assignment, the context, everything into the large language model. And I ask it not to redesign the assignment. I ask it for, based on the context that it has, the information I've given it, and my original ideas, to give me 5 to 10 possible ways that I could revise this assignment for the target audience to improve on the things that I don't think are working, to make the assignment work better. Now, I like to do that in both right now in both Claude and Chat GPT and get an initial 5 to 10 ideas from both. And then I will often look at those ideas, review them, and think about what I know about my students. So sometimes, for example, it might recommend things that I know the students that I have in the intro class, intro to professional performance class, are going to think are too silly or too out there, or maybe don't have the skill set for yet. The models, unless you give it access to everything or you tell it all the details, don't necessarily know what's in the lecture videos, what's in the readings, what is the information you're expecting students to use to complete this assignment. So you also have to look at the suggestions to determine which of these really could work based on the supports and the guidance I'm already giving students and the content that they're already getting taught and the activities they're already doing within my classroom or within my online course module. So that's the next step. I look at those two outputs. I actually look first for areas of similarity. What are some things that are being suggested by both models? And then I'll look at what the differences are across the models to see if there are things that I can, for lack of a better term, Frankenstein together. And often that's actually what happens for me in that step. I take little pieces of multiple ideas and kind of build them together and rewrite the assignment myself, Frankensteining those pieces together. Now, in some cases, it's a complete revision, like I'm throwing it out the window and doing something completely new. In other cases, I'm just tweaking the current one so I can take these little Frankenstein ideas and put them back into the original assignment. And then when I finish that, I put my entire rewritten assignment, not with a rubric yet, just the assignment instructions, back into both models. And I ask it to give me some feedback on the clarity of the assignment, how the new assignment may improve on the negatives that I was finding from the first iteration of the assignment, what might be missing, what I might need to explain better, what questions students might have. And I will ask it to identify if there are additional challenges that this new assignment and this new format might bring that might not make it worth changing. So I look at the output from both models to see where kind of my blind spots are. What are some things that I thought were easy or obvious that maybe a student, again, remember, it has the context about which students I'm talking about for this specific course with this specific assignment. And what am I missing that might impact those students' ability to be successful? And I'll go through that again and I will look for areas that I think I could do better. Now, I've talked about this before. I am a big user of intentional ambiguity. There are times when I want students to be creative. I want them to try to figure out, explore, understand, do some research on things. So I don't give them all the information. I don't make it like a checklist. And so I'll sometimes pull things out of assignments. But what I am looking for from the LLMs is making sure that somebody with a base level of knowledge could at least get started and turn in something that I can then give for feedback. Usually in those outputs, there's one or two things that I'll take back and revise the most recent version of the assignment. I look at the whole thing again, remembering again my course, my context, my students, what I know about them, what I think they will gravitate toward, what I think that they will be interested in, and what I think they may struggle with in the assignment, and determine whether I need to do another round of edits. And then again, ask the models again for some feedback, asking them most often to act like they are a student within this specific class who has this general level of background knowledge and see what questions they may have about the assignment. When that's all done, I will look back through and make sure that how things are written in the way that I talk, the way that will be familiar to students from what they've learned about in the class so far. And then one of my favorite things that I will do with this new assignment is actually use AI to help build the rubric. I will take the assignment, the full assignment, and I will ask usually ChatGPT because that's the model I've been using the longest. And so it knows me the best. And I will have it help me create the rubric. Now, as somebody who's been using these models experimentally, pretty wide ranging since November of 2022, I have trained the model on how I like to write rubrics. I have things that are relatively similar across rubrics, things like specificity and detail, or use of course content and evidence. So those elements are pretty similar. And then I may have, depending on the type of assignment, there is something related to the quality of the output, the professionalism of the output, and something related to content. So it knows pretty well. I use exceeds, meets, below expectations. I like to write a paragraph to describe each of those. And because it's been so well trained on my rubrics, I will upload the assignment, ask it to create the rubric in my style with specific descriptions of what students need to do to land in meets, exceeds, or below expectations. And then I output the whole thing into a Word document and go back from the beginning and read everything again from the top, making sure that it's my voice, making sure that it has in it what students need to be successful, pointing them to resources in the class where appropriate, and giving them examples of how they could maybe use AI to help them complete this assignment. And then read the whole rubric again to make sure that the criteria are clear and there are differences in those specific categories. At the end, I tend to have an assignment that is better aligned with the outcomes and is a little bit different than my typical go to assignments because all of us, no matter how engaged we are in teaching, have those types of assignments we just like to do. And using AI for me to help redesign assignments can push me beyond that kind of usual suspects to something a little bit different, a little bit unique, and that better meets student needs. Now, a couple of notes. First, I require students to disclose their use of AI. So if I use AI to revise an assignment, I put a disclosure at the end of the assignment, letting students know that I did, in fact, use AI to help redesign the assignment. And I explained to them what I did and how I did it. Maybe not in quite the amount of detail I just did for us here, but I'm hoping you'll be able to replicate the process so it's a little bit more intense in this explanation. Now, what did this actually look like? I did this recently this summer for a course I teach as a adjunct professor, and it's a strategic communication in sport course. And since I've been teaching this course, it had a crisis communication case study. I'm a big fan of case studies, and I was using that assignment to push students to apply concepts within crisis management and image reputation repair in within their graduate course. And it's been just a traditional paper. Students would pick a crisis, they would analyze that crisis and the communication around it, and they would use the course concepts to describe what could have been done more effectively to manage that crisis. So it's kind of like a describe what happened, give some examples of the communication, describe based on what you know now how they could have communicated it better and what recommendations you might have. And it's been working fine, but I've been a little frustrated because I felt one, like there are 3 papers in this summer course and it feels a little stagnant. It feels like in a communication course that I could give students another way to communicate their ideas and complete their assignments in a way that pushes them to use different communication tools like speaking. And I also was feeling like I was getting the same crises over and over again, and that papers were being fairly generic. And that may be because students were using AI to write the paper. It may be because students found the same crisis, easier to talk about. But regardless, I wanted to push them a little bit further into analyzing the crisis, then thinking about, okay, the immediate response is over, but now you're tasked with how do you move forward in the next 6 months? It's not like crisis communication is only in the moment, but there is how do we move forward? So they actually analyzed the crisis. They had to give specific examples of the communication. They analyze the crisis, then they talk about what they would recommend doing for the following 6 months past the crisis. How do they continue to do image repair and put out information and content on their own channels or within the press to try to move forward from the crisis. And then lastly, the final slide that students talk about is their from day one approach. So if they had been there from day one, what would they have done first that was different from what the organization chose to do? And students were given a role. They were acting like a PR consulting agency, and they created a slide deck that they pitched their image repair, their 6 months image repair strategy to the business. Now, this is the first year that I've done this assignment, and it's a little bit different. The slide deck piece makes students, even if they do use AI to create it, they'll have to engage and read it at least a little bit, and then they have to actually present it. So, at the very least, even if they're leaning into AI, they will have to at least say the things out loud. So, maybe there'll be an opportunity to connect the ideas and learn there. But what I really liked about the small change to this assignment, moving it from that traditional paper to this pitch deck, is almost the change in the perspective of who they were and what they were doing. They were no longer a student in a class. They were a PR agency. They were thinking about it from if you're pitching this to an athletic director or a GM or an athlete's crisis manager, whoever it might be, what would you do differently and how would you analyze the crisis in a way that, doesn't turn them off, right? You can't just say, you did a terrible job. You have to think really critically about how do you message about a failure they might have had and how you can help them improve in a way that builds rapport instead of demolishes it. So there were lots of little lessons in there that changed the assignment just a little bit. And I'm hopeful students are still working on that assignment now, but I am hopeful that the outcomes will show a little bit deeper connection to the crisis, less description and more analyzing of what happened. So I revised that assignment using that exact process I just outlined within chat. And it gave me some initial ideas that I didn't love and that my students didn't have the skill set to do, or that didn't make sense for an online course. For example, it wanted students to role play and each be given in groups, each be given a different part of the scenario to play out. Could be really cool in an in person class. We could certainly make it work in an online class, but it wasn't what I was looking for. I didn't want students to see it from just one side. I wanted them to think about it from a big picture point of view. And that's where our discernment and our understanding of our students and what our goals are for them make a big difference when we use AI to help improve our assignments. Now, I hope that it was helpful to see how an assignment can be walked through from step one all the way through, thinking really intentionally as you engage with AI about how you can make this specific assignment better. This is something that my friends in academia have told me for years. They'll tell me about a challenge that they're having, and I'll give them three solutions right away. My brain works that way when it comes to assignments. So it's not that I couldn't do this without AI, but it is that I can do this better with it. I can push a little bit further past my own knowledge base, past my own creativity to develop things that are a little bit more interesting, hopefully engaging, and applied for students who are going to be getting out and working in the workforce. Now, in all my assignments, I have suggestions for how students can use AI in the work. I find that if I also give students license to use AI in the assignment in some ways, giving them specific guidelines about where it might make sense or where it won't make sense to use AI, they will use it more responsibly. For example, for the case study I just gave you, having students use AI to help research what happened and get examples is a great idea. I always remind them to ask for sources, to check those sources, and to make sure they get their facts correct. But helping with that initial research is a great use of the tool and might allow them to dig a little bit deeper than if I told them don't use it at all. They'll go to two websites and think they're done. But if they can use AI to get a broader understanding of what happened because they'll spend their time more efficiently, I think that can be a good thing. Now, on the flip side, I will often tell students in places I don't want them to use AI. For example, if the last part of this is a reflection on what you learned about crisis communication through the case study, I will explicitly state, I'm interested in what you learned. I'm not interested in what AI learned. So tell me what you learned. Please don't use AI for this. Now, do some students probably still do so? Maybe. But the more that we can guide them with that, the better. Now, if you have been using AI to help change, revise, improve your assignments, I'd love to hear how. I'd love examples of what you're doing and how you're doing it. Please feel free to share those in the comments. You're always welcome to email me at becky@theengagedprofessor.com. If you are interested in being a guest on a future episode, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to share with others what people are doing, not just with AI in their classrooms, but with anything that you're doing within your classrooms, ways you're reaching students, things you're doing outside of the classroom, whatever it might be, anything that can help us all get better. I love to have you share. Thank you for listening. I look forward to seeing you again on the next Prof Talk Pod.